hearty welcome to everybody joining us for Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. This is our first webinar for the 2024 season, which is super exciting. And as Mike was just saying, it's our 16th season of Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. So my name is Charlotte Glen. I am the NC State Extension Master Gardener Program Manager. So I'll be kicking us off with welcome today. Then Matt and Mike will be giving us a deep dive into the plant disease and pest issues of brassicas, which is the group of plants that many of our cool season vegetables, such as broccoli and cauliflower, as we see in the picture, and collards and kale, all those plants belong to that family. Then they will go on to the standard Be on the Lookout feature that we have with every one of our webinars. So the BOLOs stand for Be on the Lookout. So those will be insect pests and plant diseases you will likely be seeing either now or in the coming months in your yard or landscapes in your community. And Caroline Richardson will finish us off with some program announcements. So we welcome everybody and are just so excited to have you here and to be starting another seasons of Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. As I just mentioned, we are the Plants, Pests, and Pathogens team. Matt Bertone is the director of the NC State Plant Disease and Insect Clinic, as well as the diagnostic entomologist there. So he gets to see all the insect samples that come in and work on identifying those. Mike Munster is the plant disease diagnostician, which is quite a word to say, diagnostician, and he focuses on commercial ornamentals. So he works especially with those samples coming in from nurseries and greenhouses, but as well as our plant disease expert here with Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. And then Caroline and I are with the NC State Extension Master Gardener Program, and we are just thrilled to have everybody here today. A little bit about Plants, Pests, and Pathogens is if this is your first time joining us. It is a continuing education webinar series. It's both for our NC State Extension Master Gardener volunteers and extension professionals. So as a Master Gardener volunteer, this does count as continuing education hours towards your 10-hour per year minimum. So please make sure and submit this as education hours. If you signed up on the EMG intranet calendar, that education hour report will be automatically generated for you. You'll just need to submit it. So the webinars meet the fourth Tuesday of every month from February through October, so during the growing season, and we're always at 10 o'clock and wrapping up at 11:30. We do want to make sure everybody knows this year we are not planning a Plants, Pests, and Pathogens webinar for September, because that will be when we are holding Extension Master Gardener College, which is our continuing education conference that's held every other year. So this is an EMG College year, and EMG College is happening that fourth week of September, and we really hope to see you there. With Plants, Pests, and Pathogens, the purpose of our webinar series is to focus on diagnostic tips. So, as in today with Matt and Mike taking us through the disease and pest issues of the Brassica family, the focus will be on how to diagnose those problems. What do you look for? And how to confirm that this is likely what it is, because once you have that information, once you know what the disease is or what the pest is, then you have a whole world of information at your fingertips that you can look up. There are all kinds of extension publications and resources available to help you find, once you know what the problem is, to help you find out what to do about it, what to treat, or what the next steps are. We also have some other resources such as the Extension Foundation OneSearch that will allow you to search extension resources all across the country. That's extension.org/search. And we've posted some Google search tips on the EMG intranet. So there's all kinds of resources out there once you know what it is. So our webinar series helps you get to that point, so then you can go find that information. For our schedule this year, we're continuing as we've done in past years in February, April, July, August, and October. Matt and Mike are our feature speakers, and they will be giving us some in-depth looks into certain plant groups and their issues. As with today, we're doing brassicas. In April, the focus will be on plant disease and pests of hydrangeas and crepe myrtles. In July, we'll do something a little different, and we're going to talk about insect ID, particularly common groups of pollinators, and that will help get us prepared for the Great Southeast Pollinator Census, which takes place in August. Our August webinar will continue the tradition we've had for several years now of this being an opportunity for you to submit photos of plant diseases and pests from your landscape or garden. So as you're looking around this spring and summer and you see things and you don't know what they are, be sure to take some pictures, some nice clear close-up pictures, as well as step back a little bit and get that whole shot of what's going on over the whole plant. So you'll have those ready to submit for our August webinar. And then we'll finish things out in October with another very popular tradition called Critter or Not, which is a game where we get to guess or not guess, make educated, informed decisions and responses to the question when Matt and Mike prompt us with pictures of different things that have come in through the plant clinic of whether it is a critter or not. So always a great way to finish out the season. In the other months, in March, May, June, and September, of course, with September this year is going to be a little different, but in March, May, and June of this year, we will have a guest speaker who will tell us about a current horticultural topic. So next month in March, we're excited to welcome Laura Barth, who leads the Extension Gardener online courses. She will be giving us a refresher on houseplant ID and care. In May, Scott Zona, who is the Plant Toolbox Manager, he will be telling us how to get the most out of the Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox. We do have a speaker lined up for June, but we're just waiting on that final confirmation. So that will be confirmed very soon, and we'll have those details posted on the EMG intranet. But there's definitely going to be a webinar and a guest speaker. So we'll keep you on tenterhooks just a little while longer about who that will be. And again, in September, we hope you'll be able to join us in Raleigh for Extension Master Gardener College. Now, everything you need to know about plants, pests, and pathogens, including the schedule, how to register, and the recordings. I know many people want to know, find the recordings, watch recordings. That is all posted on the EMG intranet. So in fact, this short link, go.ncsu.edu/PPP, will take you straight to the information page. You can bookmark that, and then you always have it ready to visit. Or if you log into the EMG intranet and you're on your county homepage, here are the steps of how to navigate to the plants, pests, and pathogens information. First, you would click on the North Carolina link at the top of the page from your county homepage, because the information about plants, pests, and pathogens is on the North Carolina site. Then you would just scroll down, and in that red column, look for plants, pests, and pathogens and click on that, and it'll take you to that same page that this link will take you to. So we encourage you to visit, and anything you need to know about plants, pests, and pathogens will be there. And with that, it is time to turn it over to Matt Bertone and Mike Munster for our feature today, which is the pest and plant disease issues, again, with a focus on the Brassica family. All right, Matt and Mike, you are up. I'm going to stop my share.
All right, thank you, Charlotte. Today I'm going to go first. So welcome everyone to this new season. Just in case, oh, hold on a second here. Make sure I got my slideshow there. So are you seeing a one-screen slideshow? No?
Not yet.
Not yet.
1 second. Well, I wanted to just say for those who are new, actually, if you can find your response, to give a thumbs up if you are a first-time participant in Plants, Pests, and Pathogens this year. We want to give you a welcome as well. And also, I will mention that the word pathogens, for those who aren't familiar with it, just means microorganisms that cause disease. So we make sure to get that clear. So yep, we see a couple of thumbs up there. Allie, Lisa, So welcome to all of you. And with that, I will start my lecture. So now it should be on screen, I hope.
Looks good,
Yep,
Mike.
we
Ready
see
to
it now.
roll.
All right. The Brassicaceae is the official scientific name of this family that we're talking about today. And that is maybe new to some folks, although it's been quite a while that the official change was made to keep it in line with the rule that you're supposed to name the family after one of its members. You may be more familiar with the old name, the crucifers, which refers to it means cross-bearer. And if you look closely at the individual flowers of the plants in this particular family, you'll notice that they are in the shape of a cross. You may also have heard of it called the mustard family because mustard is one of its members, although I'm going to include that down in the field crops area. This slide just to show a little bit of the diversity of the family. Within the vegetables, the big category is, of course, those that are members, different species within and subspecies of those species within the genus Brassica. So that's where we have our collards, which is our number one member of the family that we received in the clinic over the last 15 years or so, but also cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, bok choy, kale, turnip, rutabaga, kohlrabi, Swiss chard. So there's quite a list of the members of this family that we use, specifically this genus that we use for vegetables. Also, some of you folks may have tried to grow arugula. I have not attempted that myself, but it is a member of the Brassicaceae as well, even though it you think of it as maybe a leafy type of green like a lettuce, but it's actually in this family. And radish and horseradish are in the family as well. Turning to the ornamentals, candy tuft, which is a real favorite of mine, has these nice white blooms, although my wife says could come in a color other than white. But this time of year with actually since, February, March, April, it does quite a spectacular show. Another couple of flowers that I consider old-timey, or I think of them that way, like stocks, Matthiola, and wallflower. Also sweet alyssum, and what we have heard called flowering kale, which is being used for its ornamental foliage rather than actually the blossoms. Unfortunately, there are also weeds in this family. Bittercress, there's one coming up there in the stone path between my house and our shed. And Virginia pepperweed is another one that I have seen around. So keep in mind that the family also has weedy members that may serve as hosts of some of the problems, especially the ones Matt's going to talk about. So with that as an introduction to the family, let's see. Let me also mention that it made the cover twice of the 2024 Vegetable Crop Handbook, which is now out. This is more geared toward the professional growers, but you may find some good, helpful information in there. So, I have actually, that's an error. That should just be HTTP, not HTTPS. Vegcrophandbook.com is the short URL for it. And you'll notice there that there's a nice big picture of some Brussels sprouts. And in the upper left, there's a wasp on a cabbage leaf. And what is it doing there? Well, we'll let Matt talk about that.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it now or later?
Up to you.
Well, you'll see whether I mention wasps or not, but it's there for another reason other than the plant itself. It's actually munching down on something, probably something we'll be talking about.
All right. So whet your appetite a little bit for the critter part of this. Our biggest problem that we get on our homeowner brassicas or crucifers in general is the abiotic problems, the things that are not actually infectious diseases or living pests. Number one among those would be, of course, nutrient deficiencies. And one of your clues is going to be the uniformity of the symptoms. So notice this is what we call an interveinal chlorosis, and it's very regular. There's almost every space between the veins of those lower leaves is turned yellow, or chlorotic as we call it. Notice too that it's just on the lower leaves of the plant, and you know that when you get symptoms of a nutrient deficiency on the lower leaves, then you want to suspect one of the mobile nutrients that the plant is able to pull out of the old foliage and repurpose to the new. So the uniformity of this, well, you can get diseases that are more prevalent on lower leaves than upper, but noticing that it is probably a nutrient deficiency, you would suspect a mobile nutrient. And the thing to do here, of course, would be a soil test or possibly even a foliar nutrient test to see what it is that is deficient. And the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services Agronomics Division can help you out with that service. Once we get into the actual diseases, though, by far the #1 disease that we see on brassicas is black rot. And this should not be confused with black rot of grape or black rot of apple or black rot of sweet potato or black root rot of pansies and perennials. Those are all actually different diseases from one another and different from this. Specifically, this one is, unlike those others, this one is a bacterial disease. It is caused by the bacterium Xanthomonas campestris, which affects all of our Brassica species. There's, I think it's, I'm not sure if it's another species or another subspecies that is the one that occurs on radish, but don't quote me on that. Typically, we talk about the V-shaped lesions being what you would use to diagnose it. So you notice on the margin of the leaf, and you can see here the sort of a roughly V-shaped lesion opening toward the margin there. That would be one thing you would look for, but that's not always going to be the case. So here's another photograph showing something that's, there's somewhat angular lesions, but not exactly V-shaped, at least those in the center there. You may also, if you were to look closely, and you can kind of see it on the first photograph there, the blackening of some of the veins. This particular bacterium can become systemic in the vascular system of the plant. It will overwinter in residue, so the plant residue that stays in the garden. Fortunately, though, it will disappear as that plant residue breaks down over time, which means a rotation is going to be something that we can use against this. Unfortunately, it can also overwinter in seed. And here's a picture of, this is actually a Tom Cresswell picture. That's a cotyledon of a cabbage plant, and almost looks like holes punched in it where the bacteria have infected. So this thing can actually come in the seed. So you have to be very careful about your purchasing of planting material. Favored by wounding, that aids entry into the plant of the bacteria, and by moisture. And then you can also get soft rots coming in secondarily to the infection by black rot. You can also get soft rots coming in as secondary to any kind of injury. There is a table, let me also mention as a resource, and I will talk a little bit about management here, but as a resource, in the North Carolina Agricultural Chemicals Manual is now out for 2024. This is going to have a heavy emphasis on the commercial growers and products that are available for them to use. But there's also a few nifty tables like this one. It's table 10-22, importance of alternative management practices for disease control in brassicas. And if you look at the column for black rot, you can see there are quite a few things that are listed as either good or excellent in terms of managing it. So things having to do with water, such as not handling the plants when they're wet and avoiding overhead irrigation. Crop rotation, which I already mentioned, to allow those the plant material to break down. Deep plowing, that probably wouldn't apply to most home gardens, and destroying crop residue with the same idea. Hot water seed treatments can be used to reduce the degree that you've got it in the plants, but most people are going to be buying their transplants. So the important thing is to watch to make sure that those transplants are look really good and symptom-free when you're going to purchase them. Reducing mechanical injury, pathogen-free planting material, mentioned that, and resistance cultivars. I'm not aware of, I didn't really look for any that might be available to the home gardener in that particular category. But you can see there are quite a few things that can be done to help us manage this particular disease. And notice, well, this is of course the alternative management. There is not anything that you can use here that would be, well, I would have to double check and see whether any kind of sprays would be helpful. But I'm gonna withhold judgment on that particular one for this. When we're talking about rotations, Again, you want to rotate among members of different families. In that vegetable crops handbook, this is the table as it came out a few years ago, but the families haven't changed. And you can see the list of things to rotate among, avoiding members of the same family until the 3rd, 4th, or 5th year. Let me also just mention that the Xanthomonas, again, not sure exactly it's the same species and subspecies, but can get on our Brassicaceae than the ornamentals, at least on the candy tufted can. I believe I've seen it on stalks too as well. So this is a picture from a nursery in Ohio last November, and it did a pretty bad number on the candy tuft there on the iberis. So that's black rot. That's our #1 disease on the crucifers that we see in the home gardens. Much less common, but I did want to talk about is, well, this other one. But what's the difference here? What do folks notice that is not similar to what we had in the previous? Let me open the chat here and see if anybody wants to chime in. Okay, lesion's not V-shaped. Well, that's good. Larger part of the leaf area affected, although eventually black rot can do pretty. No holes, no black veins, not in veins. Okay, well, what I'm actually going for here is this. You've got not just that decay of that petiole there, but you've got the presence of fungal mycelium. So here we're seeing the actual organism that's causing it. Not that you're going to see it right initially, but you do see the progression from a water-soaked lesion, then the appearance of the white fluffy mycelium or the fungal material itself, and progression to, you get some real severe decay, rot going on there. And eventually the formation of, you can kind of see them in the picture on the right there, especially down in the bottom right corner, but here's a close-up being held by my hand with my dirty fingernails. The sclerotia, the survival structures of this fungus are really characteristic. They're about the size, shape, and color of mouse droppings, although the insides are white colored. And those turn out to be important in the life cycle of the fungus, which I'll mention in a moment. Here on this picture, you can see where there are sclerotia that have formed within the stem. So even on some of its other hosts, that's one place you want to look. This is not as picky as black rot, so it will affect your brassicas, but also other vegetables, even unrelated ones. Some of our flowers, snapdragon comes to mind, tobacco. It is, though, something that we would not see in the warmer months of the year. So it's something probably after mid-May that we're not going to be encountering as causing problems in the garden. The spores are wind-borne, so they can blow in from a distance, for example, from fields that had diseased plants in them the previous year, because these sclerotia, these little hard bodies, will survive for years in the soil, making it harder to control, perhaps. And you'll notice if you go to that same reference that I mentioned, the Alternative Management Practices for Disease Control in Brassicas table, there's actually nothing listed as good or excellent against sclerotinia. It's all either poor or fair. I would, of course, suggest, if you do have this problem, to remove the plants from the garden so that they can, you don't have those sclerotia falling into the soil and overwintering. But there's really nothing you can do in terms of effective sprays available to the homeowner, or too much you can do. Of course, you want to reduce your water, reduce the injury that's occurring, but there are not as many tools in our toolbox against this particular disease that are going to work well. Let me just round this out with a couple more. Those are the two that I wanted to highlight, but we can also get some other types of leaf spots. There's one that's particular to turnip and Swiss chard called Pseudocercosporella. That is a fungus, and that's pictured there on the left. And there are some alternaria leaf spots, different species of alternaria that can occur on Brassica as well. I didn't put a photo here of downy mildew. That is pretty rare in the home garden on our brassicas. We do have to worry about it a lot on our on our cucurbits, but that's a completely different organism. The one on Brassica, we don't really see it that much in the home garden, although a little bit more maybe in production. And finally, and this one I'm going to leave as a question to the group again, what is going on here? Anybody want to dare? Many folks are saying nematodes. Well, it turns out that's not the case. This happens to be ugly turnips. This is a completely different disease. I don't think I've ever talked about it on Plants, Pests, and Pathogens before. Not a common one, fortunately. And it's caused by something that's neither a fungus, nor a bacterium, nor a nematode, nor a virus. It's a very different kind of organism. There's a wonderful name, Plasmodiaphora brassicae, and the common name is clubroot of crucifers. You can see it does form pretty nasty looking galls on the root systems of the plants. Unfortunately, this is one that will survive many, many years in the soil. So be glad that you don't have it if you're growing your family Brassicaceae. With that, I think I will close it up and see if there are any questions.
I got a question, Mike.
Uh-oh.
What kind of organism is it?
Yeah, it's I think they considered it, sometimes it falls under the category of the slime molds, but I didn't want to say that because it's nothing to do with the myxomycete slime molds that we had talked about in the past and that we see, you know, forming the spore-bearing structures in mulch and so forth. So yeah, it's kind of its own thing.
Those are always fun. All right. Well, in the interest of time, I've got a bunch of critters to talk about, so maybe I'll start. But please add your questions to the chat. Mike can maybe type them in, or at the end we'll answer them and take a look. I will share my screen now. Actually, before I share my screen, I just want to say that with critters, so the mustard, the kind of spiciness we love from mustards and things like that is actually a chemical, sulfur-based chemical that is really noxious to a lot of insects and a lot of pests. But there are a lot of specialists that have kind of overcome that, and even some of them use those toxins to kind of help themselves. And also there are a lot of generalists that will still feed on these types of crops. So really what today I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the ones that are fairly specific to these crops, but just note that I know somebody mentioned whiteflies in the chat. Whiteflies will attack them, but I'm not covering them because they're not very specific to brassicans, and I want to make sure to cover these other pests. But for everyone's pleasure, I'm going to start with a couple quizzes. So we'll launch this poll, and the first crucifer critter quiz is: what crucifer pest is this? Is this the cabbage looper, a cabbage maggot, a flea beetle, a yellow margin leaf beetle, or a cabbage aphid? And I will, if I can find it. There we go. Let's see. Launch this. Okay. So go ahead and answer what you think it is. All right, I'm gonna give everybody about, let's see, what do we got? Let's give everybody about 15 more seconds. Got 56% of people. All right. Now, please try to answer in the poll if you can. If not, no worries, but it's easier to record there. All right, I'm going to end the poll there. And basically, so we have the majority of people, 45% of people say it's a cabbage maggot. Then we have, let's see, next most is cabbage looper and then cabbage aphid. Okay. So I'm not going to give the answer until we revisit these at the end. And what I'm going to do is move on to the next one, next quiz. So which crucifer pest laid these eggs? Is this the cabbage webworm, cabbage maggot, vegetable weevil, yellow margin leaf beetle, or harlequin bug? And I'm going to run, let me stop sharing. Let's see, run another poll. Oh, okay. All right, so you should all see this on your screen now. So let's see what we got. All right, people coming out of the gate real quick with this, and we got 50% of people answering. So we'll maybe cut this one a little shorter, give everybody about 10 more seconds. Okay. All righty, we will end the poll there just in the interest of time, and I'm going to share the results. Okay, so looks like the majority of people, 56%, say it's the harlequin bug, and then the next most popular answer is cabbage maggot. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll move on. So, I'm going to start off with some Lepidopterous pests. So these are the moths and butterflies. And the first, the most major one, or at least one of the most common ones, is the diamondback moth. This is Plutella xylostella. It is an old world species, but it's now found worldwide. Here's the adult over here, and you can see these diamond shapes on the back is how you identify them. They're fairly small moths. And it is one of the most important crucifer pests ever. It's kind of one of those kind of cliche, not cliche, but very well-known ones. And it's famous for developing resistance, actually. So some populations have extensive chemical resistance. And in fact, they are looking at, I think they've even released some genetically modified members of this species to combat its own species, basically. And so they're looking to control them by using that. So they are often not a huge problem because they're fairly small insects, but can be when they're in large populations. And that's the adult. You'll see them at light somewhat commonly, but really it's the larvae that are going to be doing the damage. Now, larvae, which are caterpillars, of course, are green to yellow-green and small, about 1/3 of an inch long. They are the smallest when full grown of all the caterpillars we're going to talk about today. And they have these very distinct dark hairs and these long prolegs at the tip of the abdomen, these false legs that are shaped in a V. Behaviorally, they're also pretty distinct in that they're very nervous caterpillars. So if you approach them or you kind of pry open a leaf and you see one, it's going to usually flail and wriggle off the plant and kind of tether itself down with a silk line. And then when the coast is clear, it'll come back and start feeding on the plant again. They live and feed cryptically in the folds of leaves and chew small holes in the leaves. And this pest will also then pupate on the plants. So they spin this very light, lacy cocoon, and you'll have this greenish yellow, pale pupa inside. And so you'll see them there. The adults will overwinter in debris and lay eggs again in the spring. And we're going to talk a lot about debris and whatnot over the course of this. But that's the diamondback moth. Another moth, the caterpillar pest, is the cabbage looper, Trichoplusia knee. One of my favorite names when you shorten it because it's T-knee, even though it's bigger than most of the other caterpillars we're going to be talking about. But these are medium-sized caterpillars growing to about 1 inch long, and they're loopers, which means they're basically an inchworm. Now, they're not a true inchworm in the family Geometridae. They are a noctuid moth. And because of that, they have one more pair of prolegs, but they're known, they can be readily identified by that kind of looper kind of behavior and with these 3 pairs of prolegs. Also, they're kind of greenish with this white stripe down the side. Adults are medium-sized brown or gray moth, active at night. You sometimes see them around your flowers at night if you go out and investigate. And I'll show you that on the next slide. The caterpillar's feet hidden on the undersides of leaves and sometimes within the leaves. And every once in a while, they will even bore into the main parts of the plant. There are several generations per year, and they feed on a wide variety of plants, but Brassicaceae is the preferred host. So, in fact, cotton is another major crop host of theirs, and they do feed on a lot of different things, even some ornamentals sometimes. And there are other kinds of loopers that are closely related, like the soybean looper and whatnot. Now, the adults are kind of pretty. They've got this kind of squiggly, almost figure eight type pattern on their wing. And here again, here's a larva when it's not looping, but you can see kind of some of the damage and some of the more extensive damage from this caterpillar on plants. And because it's a larger caterpillar, it can strip leaves pretty well, chewing large holes in the leaves. Okay. Now, again, another lepidopteran, this time a butterfly. Most people don't think of butterflies as pests, but this species in particular, the cabbage white butterfly, also called the imported cabbage worm, Pieris rapi, is a non-native insect, but has been here in the U.S. for a long time. And you'll often see the adults flittering around these kind of light white, sulfur yellow, pale sulfur yellow colored butterflies with this black spot on the wing. They'll have two black spots if it's female, one if it's a male, and these will kind of fly around the fields and gardens and places like that, looking for their host plants, which are cabbages and relatives. The caterpillars are large, about 1 inch long, green to bluish green, often with a dorsal yellow stripe, and you'll see that on the next page. And one of the most common features of this, or one of the most distinguishing features of these caterpillars, are that the skin is very rough, almost like sandpaper, with numerous fine hairs covering the body. So they're kind of a little fuzzy, kind of like a peach fuzz almost. And there are several generations each year in North Carolina. So here's what the larva looks like, fairly distinct. Like I said, they have almost these little speckles on them, have this secondary segmentation on the segments. They're kind of this rough sandpaper-like look with, like I said, these very fine hairs all over the body. The eggs at the top right are laid singly on young larvae feed superficially. As they grow, they chew larger holes in leaves and sometimes bore into the plant. And here's the chrysalis. It's a butterfly, so it turns into this kind of pupa that looks like this kind of really interesting kind of creature tied to the plant. They do have some natural enemies. I've seen them parasitized by wasps before. You can also hand remove them, and there's some chemicals that will work. And again, as we wrap up, I'll hint on a little bit of control, but again, this is more for recognition. Another caterpillar, and there are lots, of course, is the cross-striped cabbage worm. So this is a crambid moth, Evergestis rimosalis. The larvae are pretty distinct among all the cabbage worms, basically the cabbage caterpillars. They have these yellow sides with these black and white cross stripes. That's where the name comes from, of course. The eggs are laid in masses and often infest in groups. In fact, these were fairly mature caterpillars, and they were still hanging out in a group. And they most often chew holes in newer growth and the tender leaves. And you can see some of the fecal matter. That is also another characteristic of a lot of caterpillars, is leaving lots of very large pellets kind of around the area. So that's one sign to look for caterpillar pests of these types of crops. And finally, as far as Lepidoptera, this one is one I have not encountered myself. In fact, I got an email with a photo of it last September or October, and I didn't know what it was, but another colleague who worked in vegetables knew. But this was the cabbage webworm. This is a crambid. This is kind of close relative of the previous one, the cross-striped cabbage worm, and its scientific name is Hellula rogatalis. The caterpillars are kind of small, about a 1/2 inch, dull gray, yellow colored with these stripes, these very distinct stripes. They actually look a lot like sunflower moth, which would feed on Asteraceae, and in fact, that's what I thought it might have been, on a weird host. But the larvae and the adults of these kind of pretty little tan moths. The larvae feed inside leaves at first, and then feed under the leaves along the midrib inside a sheet of webbing, and that's why they're called the webworm. They're not active in the cooler weather. So if your crops are kind of growing right now, in fact, at home, our garden is full of some things. They're not going to be an issue, but they're going to typically be more common in the late summer, early fall, like that email I got previously last fall. And the species affect the young fall plantings and can be severe pests sometimes of those seedlings. Okay, now let's move on to a couple of Hemiptera. These are true bugs. These have sucking mouth parts, and so they suck the juices of the plants. Now, there are several types of aphids that can feed on Brassicaceae, but two in particular are the cabbage aphid, Brevicorine brassicae, and Lipaphus erysimene, which is the turnip aphid. These species are kind of often dullish gray-green, sometimes covered in a mealy wax, and they can be present even through the winter. So the feeding in large colonies can weaken the plant and to cause distorted growth, but at low levels, they're typically not an issue. So one strategy is making sure the plants grow vigorously. It can help to prevent their damage. And of course, chemicals, oil soaps, etc., can help to reduce their numbers on these plants. And of course, with like most aphids, they have these distinct cornicles on the tip of the abdomen. They have these kind of medium-sized antennae, and they're almost always found in colonies, basically. Now, another sucking insect that is a specific pest to brassicans is the harlequin bug. This is technically a stink bug. It's a type of stink bug called Mergantia histrionica, which I really always liked that scientific name for some reason. It's very colorful, especially the adults. They look like an orange, black, and white ornamental mask. So very distinct, of course, because there aren't many stink bugs around here that are those colors, and it's really the most common one, and basically the main one that's going to be on these types of mustard crops. They feed through sucking the juices, and this causes star or cloud-like spots on the plant. Damage to young plants can wilt and attack and kill them. Older plants may just be stunted or slow to grow. Now, like other stink bugs, the adults are the ones that are overwintering, and they'll have several generations per year. And because of this, reducing host weeds and overwintering debris can help prevent the populations around your gardens. And so just a couple more pictures of these. So the eggs are really distinct, these barrel-shaped eggs with this very distinct coloration, these black and white stripes. So if you find those eggs, if you're scouting early and you find those eggs, they can be scraped off the plant, and that can just reduce, take out these, 12 individuals right there. But if they hatch, you'll have these small nymphs that are fairly brightly colored too, orange, black, and white, and they'll grow up to be these adults. But you can see the damage from these insects. Here's a couple different ages of nymphs, and you can see those star-like spots. This is very common damage from stink bugs on various plants, where they basically probe the tissue, sucking out the juices, and with their stylets, they cause that symptom, and you may get this wilting and kind of burning on the tips of these plants. But these are very large and very conspicuous insects, so it should be pretty easy to find them if they are present. Okay, now moving into some beetles. There are a couple of beetle pests of crucifers. So the Coleoptera, are the order containing beetles. And the first one is the striped flea beetle. There are a couple of species. There's actually some dark species, fully dark species, but most often I see this type. These are leaf beetles in the Chrysomelidae in the genus Philotrida. They are very small, though, about 1/8 of an inch long. They're kind of going to be kind of these tiny little hopping insects. They have this group especially is often dark, kind of elongate with these kind of yellow patches or stripes on the body, orange yellow stripes. The adults cause shot hole damage to the leaves. You can see the little holes they're eating here. Sometimes they feed just kind of superficially, and then the center dries out and kind of drops out, or they can feed through completely in tender leaves. The larvae are worm-like, but found in the soil. So most flea beetle larvae are found in the soil, feeding on roots. And unfortunately, because some of these crops have large roots, like turnips and whatnot, they can actually feed on the storage root, the thing that we're actually wanting to eat, by gouging out widening trails on the surface, or even pinholes the way they enter the actual root. And this can obviously be damaging. They can, by reducing host weeds and overwintering debris, this can reduce the populations of them. And just to show you some more specifics, so here's a picture we got. This is some turnips that we got samples of, and I was able to take photos of these larvae. So larvae of a lot of leaf beetles are called rootworms. Corn rootworm is a famous one, but you can see why they're called rootworms, because even though they are a beetle larva, they will have these legs here, and they often have this kind of hardened tip of the abdomen on the opposite end of the head, of course. They are true insects. They're not a worm, but they are fairly elongate. So that's why people call them rootworms or worms. Now, the larval damage, like I said, can be pinholes or gouging out of the surface of the root. And the adults are often going to create this shot hole damage, where if you shine a light behind it, you'll see all these minute holes everywhere. And you can often find the adults kind of hanging out in the leaves. Now, another leaf beetle, although not a flea beetle, it doesn't hop and it's a little bit bigger, is called the yellow margin leaf beetle. This is, again, a chrysomelid, and its name is Microtheca ochroloma. Native to South America, but it's been in the U.S. since at least 1947. And these are medium to small beetles, about 1/4 of an inch. They're bigger than flea beetles, but, kind of a smallish, about the size of a ladybug or so. Sometimes with a metallic sheen, bronze sheen, but they are dark with this yellow or pale edge of their elytra and these very deep pits on their elytra or the wing coverings. The larvae are caterpillar-like and gray or brown with dark plates and hairs on the body. So they do look a lot like caterpillars, and I'll show you that in a second. Both adults and larvae feed on leaves, and sometimes extensively so. So both the adults and the larvae of the species are the pests. They're both present and visible on the upper parts of the plant. They will sometimes, I'll show you this in a second. Here's some mating adults. You can see that orangish yellow border. The eggs are kind of this orange to yellow, kind of round, oblong, and laid in either singly or in batches. And the larvae are very caterpillar-like, but they have these kind of dark plates on their body, dark head, and they won't have the prolegs that a caterpillar will have. Now, you can see some of the damages from a paper talking about this pest, and they can turn the leaves into basically lace by their extensive feeding. And in high populations, they'll move into near the base of the plant and feed on kind of the crown, or even here where some of the storage roots that we might feed on, or we might eat, are poking out of the ground. They may feed on those surfaces as well. And again, they're these kind of dark, grayish brown, caterpillar-like things that are not true caterpillars. Yet another beetle. This is actually a weevil, so technically a type of beetle, but these are kind of beetles with a long snout, and they have these elbowed antennae with the little club at the end. This is a weevil called Listerdaries difficilis in the family Curculionidae. Adults are medium-sized, about 1/3 of an inch, brown and tan with scales covering the body. They actually have kind of this V-shaped dark markings on them too. And actually all are female. So there are actually a few weevil pests that are only female, so they reproduce parthenogenetically, so they can actually reproduce without mating. And the larvae, similar to the yellow margin leaf beetles, are foliar feeders, so they'll feed on the upper parts of the plant. However, weevil larvae are completely legless. So if we go back real quick, you can see these true legs on the leaf beetle larva. On weevils, all weevil larvae lack true legs, so they kind of just are almost like a grub with a nice head but no legs. They can be whitish or creamy colored, but when they feed on the plants, they get this green color as well. And they feed on a wide variety of crops and plants, and both the adults and larvae feed on various parts of the plant. Adults lay eggs starting late season through the winter, and larvae are actually active in the cool season, whereas adults then that develop from these larvae will estivate, which means they kind of hibernate in the summer, so when it's a little warmer. This species will feed on a lot of other plants, but it can be kind of common on crucifers. All right, and finally, fly pest. So this is the cabbage maggot. So it's an anthomiid fly, Delia radicum. The adults are very similar to houseflies. Here's a male and here's a female from this publication. It's a really great publication identifying these a lot of these cabbage maggots and corn seed maggots, things like that. Larvae are about 1/4 of an inch, cream-colored, legless maggots. So they don't have a true head. They don't have any legs. They kind of have this blunt and spiky tip of the abdomen. Um, they overwinter as pupae, and adults emerge in the spring, and they're pretty active early on, and the eggs are laid near the plants in the soil. And they're especially common in cool, wet springs, and the maggots hatch and feed on or in the roots. In the larger roots, they'll actually bore in, and they can actually cause stunting directly, or they can help introduce secondary organisms like the pathogens like bacteria and fungi. So they can be an issue in plants. I don't see them in home gardens very often. We're probably going to get a lot of the more foliar feeders, but a lot of these pests depend on when you plant these plants. They may be more active during certain times of the year than others, so keep that in mind. And finally, some general remarks, closing remarks about this. So generalists, like I mentioned in the beginning, there's some generalists like cutworms and some even corn earworms, things like that. Slugs and snails as well can also feed on these types of plants. I just wanted to focus on the ones that are more specific to this group of crops because, like I said, a lot of them have evolved the ability to eat these kind of really noxious plants. Of course, again, that's why we like to eat them because they are spicy and kind of tangy. One strategy, of course, cleaning up debris can help reduce overwintering sites for the pests. So even tilling a little bit can help destroy them or kind of disrupt them in the soil. But some of those things like the harlequin bug and a few of the beetles will overwinter as adults. Reducing weeds can limit other hosts. Like wild musters, and as Mike mentioned, there are several weeds that are in this family of plants, and so they are acceptable for these pests to feed on. So they'll harbor them when we're not thinking about it, and when we go to plant our plants in the garden, they can move over from those weeds, these plants in the garden. For small gardens, regular scouting and hand removal of pests can help reduce the numbers. So recognizing the good and bad eggs out there. Many of the things I didn't show eggs on were either laid in the ground or they're laid singly, so they're a little tough to find. But, again, if you have a small site, scouting the plants, kind of pulling open the leaves, things like that to look for these insects can help. You can maybe hand remove them or scrape them off or things like that. And then finally, of course, there are chemicals that you can use. I would say most home products labeled for other insects related to these should work. So, for instance, a general caterpillar chemical that works against caterpillars, even some Bacillus thuringiensis, some BT should work on most of these caterpillars. But definitely check fact sheets and guidelines online. So, with that, see. So with that, I am going to revisit our quizzes and let's see how everybody does. We're gonna put this poll out again. Let's see. Okay, so I've relaunched this one. So is this a cabbage looper, a cabbage maggot, a flea beetle, a yellow margin leaf beetle, or cabbage aphid? All right, looks like we're getting some different answers than before, which is good.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
There's no repercussions for this quiz. It's just all fun. So, all right. Well, I'm going to. Oh, we have 100% of people. Well, 100% of people answered. Oh, I don't know. Never mind. No, 45% of people answered. Let's give it another 10 seconds or so. All right. So we're going to end that here and we'll share the results. So 38% of people said D, yellow margin leaf beetle. That is correct. Again, you can see it doesn't have these prolegs on the abdomen. It does have true legs and a true head capsule, so it can't be a fly larva or anything like that. And those plates and hairs and things like that are pretty common for this species. So very good. All right. And we'll go to the next one. So here you go. Yellow margin leaf beetle is the correct answer. The next one. Let's relaunch this poll. All right. Which crucifer pest laid these eggs? The cabbage webworm, cabbage maggot, vegetable weevil, yellow margin leaf beetle, or harlequin bug? All right. People are really jumping on this one. Got 50% of people answering already. It's only 16 seconds in.
And did you notice, Matt, we have over 300 attendees right now.
I know
It's
it's
300 logins.
yeah, that's great. We're really happy for all the interest and attendance. All right, I'm gonna give this one another 10 seconds or so. Looks like we have a very strong, clear decider here. All right, I'm gonna end the poll and share it. Okay, so 87% of people said it was harlequin bug, and that is correct. And luckily, actually, many people seem to get that correct. That was the most common answer for this question at the beginning of the quiz, or beginning of the presentation. So it sounds like you all know your harlequin bug eggs. Now, I guess remember what the yellow margin leaf beetle eggs look like, and maybe some of those other Lepidopterus ones. So thanks for the participation, and hopefully you learned something. Let me look in the chat real quick to see if there are any questions to answer, and then we can move on to some bolos. Okay, let's see. Okay, need to see if I can see which all the questions that are, okay. There's one about Asian persimmon psyllid. I'll answer in the chat later. See, will cabbage looper attack hibiscus? Had a real challenge with a similar worm last year, kept coming back despite daily removal. It may. I'd be curious with hibiscus. There are a couple other pests that are more common. There's a sawfly that has a larva that looks like a caterpillar. There's a hibiscus sawfly that will strip leaves and whatnot. So one issue with that too is if you have sawflies, they won't respond to certain chemicals that affect caterpillars because it's a wasp, not a moth. But that's the one where it would be great to have photos of it or samples to take a look at it, because each of these types of plants may have different types of pests. Are there natural predators? As an example, I put up bluebird houses around my garden, and the number of hornworms in my tomatoes went down significantly. Yes, there are lots of predators of these things. So there are predatory insects like assassin bugs, and as we saw in the cover, that's a good segue for the cover that Mike showed. Paper wasps and hornets and yellow jackets, despite people hating them and being a possible stinging insect, they actually love to hunt caterpillars because they're full of lots of protein and they're squishy. They're very easy to take down, and they can butcher them for their young when they bring them back to the nest. And so, people even put out paper wasp boxes sometimes because they're not super aggressive and they're really good at searching leaves for you and finding those things. There are also a lot of parasitoids, wasps that lay their eggs in these insects. So just like you see hornworms, sometimes those white cocoons on them from a parasitoid wasp, there's a species that attacks the cabbage white butterfly, for instance. And I don't have photos right in front of me, but I've taken them before. So making sure that there are, say, not mustard weeds around if you're planting a lot of these things, but maybe other weeds or other plants that are going to have flowers that will support kind of natural enemies, things like that can really help. And also reducing chemicals that might impact these non-target insects and other organisms is really good. Would diatomaceous earth work for soft-bodied pests? I don't think so. That's diatomaceous earth I think it's been used a lot as kind of this cure-all for a lot of things, but it's not I wouldn't say it's really effective at that. It's effective for certain other things, but I would say look for some other types of recommended controls. And again, cultural practices like reducing weeds and debris can help. Let's see. So I'm not sure what looks like sushi, but I'm curious now. I could not control whiteflies and aphids on my BS. I tried everything. Any hints? I'm not sure. Is it Brassicans? Is that what you mean? Or I'm not sure. So there are some methods. There are different methods for doing that. Again, we don't really focus on control, so you can look up some things. But for whiteflies and aphids, really just making sure that you're scouting well and making sure there's good coverage. So a lot of times on the undersides of leaves, and there are some chemicals that can be sprayed on them that will kill them very quickly. Others like soaps and oils and things like that can help reduce those populations too. Are there regional differences on the prevalence of these pests? There are slight regional differences. Some things like the cabbage maggot are more common in cooler areas. So you're not going to get them as much near the coast where it's a lot warmer. And of course, these plants grow better sometimes when it's a little cooler. So different, areas of the state where they grow better, you may have more of those pests because they're more common. All right, let's see. Let's see. Last one. Does the extension website include information about how to support predator species to help with these pests? There are some resources online. I don't know of them specifically at the moment, but I would say, one of the major things that will help include biodiversity. There you go. The harlequin bug eggs, the sushi. That's spot on. Okay. I would say one of the best things to do is to plant a lot of native plants and wildflowers, things like that around your gardens, because that will attract a lot of wasps and bugs, things like that are predators that will spill over and search your garden as well. So, and again, not using really harsh chemicals like pyrethroids and stuff like that will kill the predators too. They're not really specific to the predators. Certain things, like I said, some examples are like BT, which is a biological toxin that is very active against moth pests, like caterpillars that feed on it and ingest it, but isn't going to probably kill a wasp that's kind of landing on the plant or anything like that. All right, one last question, and then we'll move on to the bolos. So, will burning your garden control any of these? Well, hopefully you're not burning them while they're growing, but I'm assuming you were saying after everything. Well, I don't know specifically about that. I would say definitely anytime you use fire for anything, it can be it can be dangerous. It can be risky. You can use that to probably get rid of some of the debris and maybe kill some of the insects that are up close, near the top of the soil surface. But I don't think that the risk is probably worth it. I think just kind of tilling it, removing a lot of the extra debris, tilling it should help a lot. And they're just scouting. So, okay, I'm gonna stop answering questions over the microphone, but we're going to move into our bolos. So these bolos are going to be for March, and these are things to be on the lookout on the critter side. So I've actually already started getting calls about these, but you should start seeing ground nesting bees coming out. These are very adorable little solitary bees. They will nest in aggregations in bare ground often, creating lots of little holes in these very fine mounds. And although they may, people are afraid of bees and wasps, these are not aggressive. They're very good spring pollinators. They are only going to be around and active for a few weeks. And so if they're in a place like a playground or somewhere like that, as long as people aren't kind of trying to smack the bees or whatever, they're going to be doing their own thing and are very good native insects. We may have some fall cankerworms emerging. So even though their name is fall cankerworm, that's because of the activity of the cool season activity of the adults. They'll lay the eggs that will then hatch around the time that plants, trees especially, are starting to produce their leaves. The leaves are nice and young and tender, and these little inchworms with these very stubby little prolegs right here sometimes are voracious. And we haven't had a big outbreak recently, but it could happen anytime. You might get some termite swarmers. So these are kind of the winged reproductive termites coming out as it warms up. If they're coming out inside of your house or right next to your house, I would definitely call somebody. If they are coming out in your yard or where there's mulch or things like that, it's probably less of a risk, but just be aware that if you see these long frilly wings and kind of massive amounts of these dark insects coming out of the ground, it's almost certainly termites. And again, we can help ID those here. As mentioned earlier, the about paper wasps and hornets and yellow jackets, the actual queens are starting to wake up from their winter hibernation, and they're going to be sometimes coming out indoors if they hibernated in your house. But you're going to start to see some of these larger kind of wasps flying around. Of course, the queens are a little bit larger because they're going to be the ones starting the colony. They need a lot of energy to start producing eggs. Once the colonies get a certain size, the workers will take over and the colony will grow over the year. But for right now, you're going to see some of these larger wasps flying around looking for sites to create their nests. And lots of other things are going to be waking up. Larger bugs, of course. You're going to start to see the leaf-footed bugs and the stink bugs, things like that. That again, overwinter as adults. Once it starts to get warm enough, they're rearing to go. They're going to get out there and find food, mate, and do all those things that they like to do. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and let Mike share his bolos.
All right, thanks, Matt. Before I do, let me just address a couple of questions that came in the chat. One of them was whether those turnips with the clubroot are still edible. And as long as there hadn't been any decay that moved in, then they should be. I didn't see any reference, never heard of anything about that particular plant pathogen causing any problem for people. The other question I saw there was whether copper sprays would help against the rots. The short answer is not much. They would not help with the sclerotinia, the head rot of the white mold. They would not help with any of the secondary bacterial soft rots, and they're classified as poor against the black rot, the xanthomonas. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of tools in our toolbox there in terms of chemicals. All right, let me go to the bolos for diseases real quickly. Okay, hold on. All right. So one of the things that you've probably been seeing still over the winter, and we had a sample of it not too long ago come in, but Entomosporium leaf spot, which is really common on Indian hawthorn and what's left of the red tip photinias out there. It causes the very bright spots and some defoliation. Sclerotinia stem rot, we already talked about in context of the brassicas, but you can have it on some other things, as I mentioned, such as some of the perennials and snapdragons, which may be out there in the garden. As the warmer, wetter spring weather comes in, we'll start seeing more botrytis blight on pansies and violas there, starting often with the flowers, the senescing flowers, and that gets a foothold with those. Just a very common fungus that you can't get away from. Camellia petal blight on our japonica, Camellia japonicas, and I've showed this before, this test that you look for the fungal material growing inside the base of the flower when you pull it off. That may be hard to see, so that's not guaranteed, but if you do see a little bit of the white fungal growth in here, then that's your diagnosis. Less common, probably, it depends on the year, would be something like a frost damage, which can also cause damage to the blooms. Boxwood blight, and we've talked before about how to recognize that based on either the leaf spots, the stem streaks, or defoliation, and the gymnosporangium rusts. Earliest one we'd probably see would be the Gymnosporangium clavipes, or the cedar quince rust on the eastern red cedar. That tends to come out in March and has the more, well, say less dramatic swellings but still the orange material. The big galls, the cedar apple rust, that'll wait a little bit longer, maybe till we get into April before it'll do its massive orange gelatinous telio horns. And in the turf area, spring dead spot, Bermuda and zoysia, the warm season grasses, where the infection that occurred in the fall then leads to winter kill. And so then you have the spots that are dead when the turf is greening up in the spring, and fairy-wing, which can occur on any particular turf type at any time of year. If you want more bolos, never fear. There is a list month by month on our website. Just go to pdic.ces.ncsu.edu and click on the bolos menu item on the left.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mike. I will share my screen and share our program announcements for the beginning of the season. All right, so there we are. And first and foremost, the most exciting announcement from our neck of the woods is that this is an Extension Master Gardener college year. So every other year, as Charlotte mentioned, we host a statewide multi-day conference for Extension Master Gardener volunteers and agents, extension agents and extension professionals. So the dates have been set for September 24th through 26th. That's the middle of the week. It's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it will be in Raleigh, held at the same location as last time. If you came in 2022, it was at the James Hunt Library, which is on the Centennial campus in Raleigh. And this is a great facility for having our get together and all of our speakers. So we hope that at this point you will save the date, mark the date, and there'll be a lot more information coming out soon. Just some highlights from the 2022 conference and to tell you a little bit about it. So this is really a continuing education opportunity for you, for everyone across the state, to keep you up to date on current research and trends. It's an opportunity to connect with other volunteers and extension professionals, and to reinforce Extension's mission, and to really help you with understanding and getting some knowledge of the connection we have to the university and all the research that fuels the information that we can share with the public. So there will be a number of different programs to choose from. There will be some pre-conference tours and workshops, as well as keynote speakers and concurrent sessions. We will have a chance this time to share ideas from with one another. So there'll be some presentations by Master Gardener volunteers from different counties sharing their projects. So we know that that can be very valuable to all of us. So please save the dates, and we will keep you posted on when more details about the schedule are available, and also when registration will open, which will be later in the summer. All right, our next Learn, Grow, Share Showcase webinar will be coming up this spring. And at this time, we are seeking presenters. So we're asking for your help. We want to hear from you. If you participated in last summer's Great Southeast Pollinator Census. So did you get a group together and observe pollinators and do a pollinator count that day? If you did, tell us about it. We'd love to share ideas so people can plan for this coming year's Great Southeast Pollinator Census. So reach out to us through email if you would be willing to share what you did last time and help other groups get some great ideas. And speaking of, this is also for marking your calendar, the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. Those dates have been set for this coming summer, and that will be August 23rd and 24th. So if you remember, this is an opportunity for Master Gardener volunteers and the general public to participate in citizen science. So it's a fun opportunity to observe pollinators for a set amount of time on these days, and it really creates an amazing amount of information and data for folks to see about what is the pollinator activity, what kind of plants are they visiting, at a point in time. So last year was the first time that this project expanded into North Carolina, and we had a lot of great participation. So we hope that you'll consider participating individually with friends and neighbors, or planning a Master Gardener volunteer event. This is a statewide Master Gardener volunteer opportunity. So you can earn volunteer hours for participating in this project. Now, there is a nice new feature at the on the Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox. As many of you might know, they use what's called tags, and tags are kind of keywords that help narrow down the list of plants. So the latest keyword or tag that they've created is Audubon. And so if you type Audubon into the search bar, and under tags, you're going to get an opportunity to see all the tags. Click on hashtag Audubon. You're going to view over 600 bird-friendly native plants. So this has linked Audubon's resources with the plant toolbox. So that's just a nice, fun way to add interest to your garden and add another opportunity to search the plant toolbox in a slightly new way. So you'll have the link to learn more about that when I send out the resources. And another resource that just was announced is what's called Common Insects of Wildflower Plantings Within North Carolina Turfgrass. So this is the long title, but it's an excellent field guide. And what it provides is featured, it provides these profiles of insects that you're going to commonly come across around our plantings of native plants and wildflowers, even within our own lawns and within turf grass and all around. But they're really well done. This is just one picture of one of the profiles of one of the bees. These are mining bees, but it's got great pictures. It's got flowers that you might see those insects on, and a little bit more information in terms of when in the year you might see them. So that resource just came out, and I thought I'd share that with you. All right, as we tried to tell you about the next upcoming online classes, these are a partnership between NC State's Online Learning and Longwood Gardens. And the next two classes that are on the horizon that will be starting soon are Understanding Plants, which starts on March 11th, and Plant Propagation, which starts May 13th. This link will take you to all the information about the classes. There are both guided opportunities to have a class in which there is a live presenter, as well as asynchronous self-study options, different price points for doing those classes. So please take a look if you're interested in increasing your knowledge, refreshing your knowledge of some of these topics. Another event that is university-wide and is coming up on March 20th, NC State hosts a Day of Giving. This is a special day that NC State tries to encourage those to donate and spread the word about programs at the university that are very meaningful to them. So we ask you, if you're thinking of donating, that this would be a special day to donate to the Extension Master Gardener program. And you can learn more about that at this link, Day of Giving. And lastly, we look forward to next month's Plants, Pests, and Pathogens. As Charlotte mentioned at the beginning, we're going to have Laura Barth, who is an extension assistant with the online learning programs. And she's going to bring us a presentation on houseplant identification and care. So she's going to refresh our knowledge on that, which, as we know, is a very popular topic today and increasing interest in houseplants. So we hope that you will join us in March for that presentation. In addition, we'll also have Matt and Mike giving our Be on the Lookout for and our announcements for the coming month. So special thanks to Matt and Mike for this first session of the year. We had amazing attendance. It's great to see everybody, and we wish you happy gardening.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending.
Yes, thank you. Have a great month and hope to see you in February. I mean, March. This is February.
I know it, almost. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, happy
And,
gardening.
And as I said, for anybody that's new, after this webinar, the recording is made available to you. And I also send out, I post on the EMG internet, the resources that were talked about today. So you'll be able to click on the live links and get all this information that we heard. All right, thanks everyone for joining.